Molly here. If you like what we're doing and you want us to keep doing more of it, please hit that subscribe button so that we can get monetized and we can keep bringing you this kind of content and more. The Last of Us Episode 4. Yay! We're back to the actual story!
It was nice to see them getting back to moving the narrative forward. I know it caused a lot of controversy for the last episode, but episode 3 just seemed like it was stuck in this place that was, even if you liked the story, one has to admit, after watching episode 1, 2, and 4, every one of those episodes moved forward with the overall narrative, and episode 3 just kind of sunk it in one place for a whole episode. So that episode 3 was definitely different than the other 3, if you like the episode or not. Yeah, it was nice to see things happening again in this episode.
Yep.
And it was centered on Ellie and Joel, which is what they've been doing outside of episode 3. So it was nice to see that.
The story picks up with Joel and Ellie in the truck, and they are traveling down the interstate. And we do get a fun scene that is almost exactly like it was in the video game, with Ellie finding a nudie magazine of Bill's. In the video game, she'd swiped it from Bill's, and in the television show, she found it in the truck. But that was a cute little scene. A father-daughter scene when it comes to Joel's reaction to Ellie shouldn't have that magazine, and then Ellie's pulling his chain, and it was a cute, funny little scene. And I'm really glad that they included that. It was nice to have the story finally moving along. They're driving along, they camp, and after that they're driving into a city, which in the TV series turns out to be Kansas City. However, when we watched the video game footage after that, they are going into Pittsburgh. So that was a difference that I didn't really care much for. I would have preferred to see Pittsburgh over Kansas City. I don't know if Kansas City comes up later in the video game, but it just leaves me scratching my head as to why. It just seems like they are moving the journey along further than where it really is. And part of me wonders if that's to compensate for the number of episodes and losing an episode to the story they chose to tell in episode 3, which really didn't move Joel and Ellie's story along at all.
Yeah, and we know it didn't move it forward because at the beginning of this episode, or toward the beginning, Joel was mentioning why he was taking Ellie, and he was mentioning he was doing it for Tess. Before this episode, now I would argue in this episode there were things that happened that drew them together, but in that third episode, nothing happened to draw them together. Joel confirmed that with that piece of dialogue, where he was saying, well, I'm just taking you because Tess asked me to.
Yeah, because in this episode, Ellie finds this joke book, and it is full of really, really bad dad jokes. And it was a fun watch in that she was just so tickled by these jokes, and Joel was just so, disgusted in the way that adults are with jokes like that. Like, you want to laugh, but you can't laugh because it's so stupid, but you really find it funny. And there were some of those that you could tell that he did, but he didn't want to because it was leading to him bonding with Ellie. And it probably gave him memories of his daughter doing the same thing. So you can see where the bonding is starting to happen, but Joel's fighting against it.
Just to make sure, I don't know where people come into watching our reviews, but we have not played the video game, so what we normally do is we watch the episode of The Last of Us, and then we watch some cutscene footage of that segment in the game, and that's how we make our comparisons. So if somebody has played the game and there's some missing pieces of what we're talking about, but the cutscenes left out, please let us know.
Yes. Joel and Ellie are traveling in the truck down the interstate, and they get to the city. The interstate is blocked, so they're going to have to go around. They make the huge mistake of trying to go through the city to get around the blockage.
Which happened in both the video game and the TV show.
Yes, which I must say, from an escape and evasion point of view, this was a huge mistake to even be going through the cities that close to begin with, but that's just my opinion. They get caught in the city, obviously, because that was bound to happen. They're ambushed.
There was a little scam being run where in both the game and the TV show, they did the same thing where there was some guy limping on the street saying, I need help. And then Joel knew that that was a trap. So what these people would do is they would fake the injury and then capture the people. And Joel wasn't falling for it. And Ellie was confused because she wasn't sure, like, why? Joel, aren't you going to help this person? And Joel's like, nah, he doesn't need help. It's a trap.
Yeah. But, throwing bricks and they had a spike strip and everything. So they're stopped by these, I guess we'll call them hunters. So their truck is wrecked. So the hunters cause them to crash the truck into what used to be a laundromat. And because there's these guys coming after them, Joel and Ellie have to jump out of the truck, and they're hiding behind the truck, and Joel sees a hole in the wall and tells Ellie to go crawl through the hole and hide on the other side, and he would clear out the hunters. She was supposed to wait until after he told her to come out. Well, Joel takes out the first two, then the third one is attacking him and getting the better of him. And it looked like he was probably going to lose. So Ellie, she decides that she's going to go through the hole in the wall, and she had swiped a gun from the desk at Bill's house. And she takes the gun and she shoots the guy who is attacking Joel, only wounding him. So after this guy is begging for his life. Ellie is just standing there really stunned by the whole situation, and Joel tells her to go back through the hole in the wall, which she eventually does. And while she is on the other side, the screaming from the guy that she wounded stops. So you know that Joel took care of business and that guy is now dead.
That contrasts a little bit differently than the video game, because in the video game, they did have them being attacked after they crashed the car, but they weren't being shot at like they were in the TV show where they had to hide behind the truck. In the video game, they were being yanked out of the cab of the truck. In the video game, it was Joel that took care of business all by himself. However, later in the video game, there was a similar scene where Joel was being drowned in the water, and he was probably going to die, similar to what was happening here when I think the guy in the TV show had him pinned down and was choking him. He had something over his neck or something. I think it was his gun. Wasn't it Joel's gun he was pushing down on his neck? But in the video game, he was drowning underwater, and then there was a gun nearby, but Joel couldn't reach it. And then in the video game, he saw a hand grab it, and then somebody shot the guy in the head that was attacking Joel, and it turns out it was Ellie.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing here is in the TV show, they're making Joel the killer of this person. But in the video game, a similar scene, Ellie had no problem shooting. Well, I shouldn't say she had no problem, but she shot the guy in the head. Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit different. That in the video game, it happened, it's hard to gauge it, but like maybe 15 minutes later after the scene in the TV show. It's hard to compare sometimes.
Yeah, there are some differences, and we'll get to that. First difference I want to talk about is the reaction of Joel to Ellie shooting someone. In the video game case, killing someone, and in the TV show, just wounding him. He was much more sympathetic to her in the TV show than he was in the video game, which I found interesting. It seems like in the TV show, they're trying to move him more toward this father figure with more empathy for Ellie's situation faster than what we're seeing in the video game.
And what's interesting in the video game is, again, later on in the video game, there was a situation where Joel had to get through this outside area, and he wouldn't be able to do it himself. So he gave Ellie a rifle and quickly showed her how to use the rifle. And then she was taking out the guys as Joel was trying to move through the courtyard or whatever that was. So that was different because they didn't have an equivalent scene of that, at least so far. Maybe next week they will, but they didn't have an equivalent scene of that in this episode. And one of the things that was in the TV show that was interesting was, so when Joel was talking to Ellie, he was trying to show her how to use the gun, and she mentioned like she learned how to use a gun at Fedra school, I guess. But Joel's kind of comment was, yeah, they might have taught her how to use a gun, but they didn't teach her how to use it correctly. So he was teaching her how to use a handgun correctly. But the video game had the rifle scene, and Ellie was uncomfortable using the rifle, but she did end up using it. Now, again, maybe next week, because they're kind of, the way they're going about the TV versus the video game, they're kind of, this episode was bouncing around all over the place and changing stuff. So we still might get the rifle scene, but it may not happen till next week.
Yeah. There were a few more differences. I mean, obviously in the TV show, you're going to have to flesh out the universe a bit more than what was done in the video game. Obviously, video games, you spend a lot of time moving around and collecting items and things like that, fighting. And in the TV show, it doesn't quite work that way. It's more story-based. So they're fleshing out other characters. As it turns out, the quarantine zone, which in the TV show is Kansas City, has collapsed. And there are people running what basically seems like some sort of gang. They don't take kindly to outsiders. There's something going on. There's a woman, I guess her name is Catherine, who appears to be in charge, and she's hunting this man and his son. And we do actually see him and the son in the video game.
Henry, I think, is the...
Yeah, Henry and Sam being the son. Henry and Sam are in both. So that's something. So far in the video game, we have not seen Catherine, but she is a very big presence in the TV show as she seems to be in charge. And she is hunting for Henry.
Yeah, Henry was the one that she wanted to go after.
Yeah, apparently he turned her brother into Fedra, so she's hunting him. Yeah, so I mean, we'll see where that goes. And while Catherine's out hunting Henry, she and one of her minions, I guess, they see the floor of one of the buildings is moving. So I don't know what's going to come up through that floor. We didn't see anything like that in the cutscenes of the video game so far, so I just have to wait till next week, I guess, to see what's going on there.
Yeah, because we stop the cutscenes when it looks like we've caught up with the TV show because we don't want to ruin the TV show for next week. So that's why if some of this is out of order and then later in the game they introduce this, we don't know about it yet because we stop it right when we think we're at the point where we've caught up with the TV show.
Yeah, but instead of telling everybody what's going on, she chooses to just cordon off the building. So we'll see. I have a feeling that's probably going to come back to bite her in the ass. That's my prediction for that. If the TV show goes the same way as the video game, it appears that Henry and Sam and Joel and Ellie will have a certain camaraderie as far as being single men with a child that this group led by Catherine isn't enamored with. So I think that if it goes like the game does, they'll form an uneasy truce. But the TV show did leave off with Ellie and Joel waking up with guns on them. So we'll just have to wait for the next episode to see what happens there, if it goes with what the game did or if it goes in a different direction.
To give credit to this episode, if one recalls last week, one of my criticisms of last week's episode was Ellie was treated like a piece of parcel, like a package that we're just delivering. In fact, Joel, this episode, even used that term.
He called her cargo, yeah.
But one of my complaints was in the video game footage for episode 3's content, that Ellie was actively helping Joel, moving stuff around, getting through doors, bringing down ladders, and in episode 3 in the TV series, she was just sitting around not doing much of anything when she was in it, which was very little. However, in this episode, Ellie was going around and helping Joel get through things, so it's almost like they heard my complaints and they're like, no, we're going to give you Ellie doing stuff. So Ellie was definitely doing stuff in this episode, and I think by her doing stuff, that was helping because her and Joel were having to work together to get through parts that were blocked off and they had to move. I think that helped with the bonding of them coming closer together. Both in the video game and the TV show, that joke book was a thing. Mm-hmm. So that was another thing that they were using faithfully. Unless the video game footage didn't show all the jokes were different, but they were still the bad jokes. So the concept was the same. I think the book title was even the same too.
Yeah, it was.
So I don't know, because we don't know where the next part of this game, the video game, goes. I'm wondering if they took Pittsburgh and Kansas City and kind of mooshed them together to try to make up some time, or if they just made this change for Pittsburgh. I don't know why. I'll be honest, I don't know why.
Well, having driven quite a bit of the distance from Massachusetts all the way out through the Midwest and even to the Southwest, I can say that there is quite the jump in distance from Pittsburgh to Kansas City. So it bothers me a little bit that there is so much of their traveling that's been cut out of the TV show, or at least it appears that way, because just I just don't buy that they were able to make that whole distance like that before they got stopped. Pittsburgh makes a lot more sense.
Which is what the video game did.
Yes,
Pittsburgh.
which is what the video game did. But Kansas City in the TV show, you make it from Boston to Kansas City without running into traffic piled up so badly on the interstate that you have to go around and then you're caught in an ambush. I just don't buy it.
Like that was the first big city they hit where they had that problem.
Yeah, I don't buy it. How did you get to Kansas City without running into something like this?
Yep. So, yeah, not a big deal. Just, I think the video game probably handled it in a more realistic manner, that Pittsburgh was the first big-ish city they hit. Because each of these big cities probably have a faction inside of there doing exactly this type of stuff.
Yeah.
The travel time, I agree with you. It didn't feel right in the TV show. But again, I don't want to harp on this, but they wasted an episode on being in one location.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they're trying to make up time here.
Well, as I said, it felt to me like being on the farm in season 2 of The Walking Dead, which basically led me stop watching that show. It lost my interest. I was sick of them being on the farm. It took too long. And I'm glad this was only one episode, episode 3 for The Last of Us, but it definitely disrupted the rhythm of the main story.
And then the correction I want to make sure that I give is I said you could skip over episode 3 and only know that they got a hold of a vehicle. And I just want to make sure to correct myself. You need to know Ellie got a hold of a gun. So that's the 2 things you need to know from episode 3. But I still stand by the fact that you don't need to watch episode 3.
Nope.
But that's your choice. If you're going to wait till the series is done with and you're done with the reviews and then watch the series, if you're not watching it, you can make the decision on whether you want to do episode 3 or not. It's your choice. I want to put episode 3 behind us because it is a very flashpoint topic type thing. And I really don't want to relive the debates on this topic. But I do want to say that episode 4 felt a lot like episode 1 and 2, where you were moving things forward, things were happening. It was all around Ellie and Joel.
It was a return to the main story.
Yeah, it felt really good. I was worried that after episode 3 that I was going to watch 1 or 2 more episodes of this and say, wow, it just made that weird turn and I'm not even going to deal with this anymore. But it got back to being centered around Joel and Ellie. So that's good news. Now, they changed a lot of stuff as we talked about. So did it keep the spirit of what was in the video game? I think mostly, but there was definitely some changes there. Overall, I think this was a good episode. It was nice to see it get back on path. However, I don't know. They're changing a lot here, and I have to wait to see the whole product before I can decide what they're doing. As I said, maybe there's stuff coming up later in the game that would be Kansas City, because in the TV show in Kansas City, in the video game, similar in Pittsburgh, these people were just kind of called hunters, and they did have a leader, but it didn't seem like it was this organized, I don't know, group of people that were forming some sort of society, which is kind of what I got from the TV show.
Not that we've seen yet, anyway.
Yeah, correct. And that's why I'm trying to hold out judgment, because maybe this will all come together and it'll be like, okay, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But when I watched the video game footage, and it was essentially Joel and Ellie getting around these, what they called hunters, which I kind of just interpreted as like pirates that took over towns to raid it. It just didn't feel the same as what was happening in the TV show, because it seemed like the people in the TV show were like residents there, and they were forming a post-apocalyptic community and so forth.
Yeah.
But maybe it'll all come together. I don't want to push out criticism before it's warranted. This episode did deviate from what I've seen decently from the video game. Did it really change the spirit of what was going on? I can't say that yet. I have to wait for a couple more episodes before I can judge that.
Mm-hmm. Overall, I enjoyed this episode. It was back to the original story that they were trying to tell in episodes 1 and 2. It moved along at the right pace to keep my attention. So I'm actually looking forward to watching the next episode, unlike last week when I was kind of dreading seeing episode 4. But episode 4 was a lot better than episode 3, at least in my opinion. I know a lot of other people liked episode 3, but I'm a main story kind of person, so I was glad to see it get back to that. What did you guys think? Did you like the return to the story? And what did you think of the story? If you are fans of the video game, what are your thoughts on the changes?
Take care.